Hey friends, how are we? Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About It. I'm your host, Leah Suzette Newmoff, and today, tonight, this week, this month, guys, happy May. How is it May? We're almost halfway through the year. What's going on? May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and throughout the month of May, we're doing all kinds of stuff in the Full Circle Wellness community. We are talking about all the things, and this week, tonight, etc., we are talking about depression. And I hope that that topic doesn't immediately sound depressing and it's like, oh my God, I don't want to hear this. Because depression is actually such an important topic. I really want to talk about this because while numbers of depression, anxiety, suicide are on the rise in America particularly, but I think globally on the rise. More people are more depressed, more anxious, and more likely to end their life now more than ever. It's insane. And every single time, guys, part of what drove me to really get into this work and want to like talk about these things and do stuff in the mental health space and the health and wellness space is every single time I hear about another shooting or another, someone's taking their own life, it's like it hits me so hard because I know what that feels like. Depression is not just an epidemic. It's not something, it is something. It is an epidemic. It is something that we should all care about. It's not just that. For me, it's my story too. And that's why it means so much to me. So this week, we're talking about depression. And throughout the month of May, we're going to be talking about depression. I'm going to bring up anxiety. I've got a week we're going to go talking about somatic experiencing, which is a really unique tool that you can use to deal with both depression and anxiety, post-traumatic stress, all kinds of different mental issues, or just stress in general. If you are, struggling in that way, somatic experiencing is something we're going to talk about next week. We're definitely going to dive into all kinds of different tools and resources. And then also on my social media right now, if you are not following me at @the_real_Leah Suzette on Instagram, every day this month, I'm dropping a new video or a post or just tidbits every single day that pertain to mental health and mental wellness. It's going to be it's either like a tool or it's a tactic, it's a tip, it's a resource, or it's just it's a topic or it's a story, just something that's relevant to the mental health conversation. And that's happening all month long. So give me a follow. I'll be, in every day with something new. So it's really, really kind of exciting as much as like, I think mental health can be very heavy for people. It can be a heavy topic of conversation. I'm really excited to talk about it because like I said, that has been my story. It is still my story now. It is important conversation because it is it's the lives of so many people that, depression, anxiety affects. Like I have friends who, they're like, oh my God, I'm so anxious all the time. I just don't know how to get it to stop. And that feeling of like fear in your chest, like your heart racing, like it's very bodily, like when you have something like anxiety. It's certainly worry and it's rumination, but it's like, it's so in your body. All kinds of stress and trauma lives in our body. It's not just a mind thing. So this week, that's what we're talking about. Also, I just want to throw out there that it's hot. It's already hot, you guys. It's May 2nd. That's when we're recording this. We're dropping this tonight. And it is like 90 degrees already. And I'm like, guys, I'm in like a tank today because I get so hot, you guys. I can't even tell you. I don't like the summer. We're keeping the water on deck tonight. Mama is burning up. And I literally this is what I wore to work today. I had like a little shacket over it. That's like a short sleeve, like military thing. But I was just like, you guys, I'm not ready. I'm not ready for the summer. I'll be the first person to admit I hate the summer. It's so unpopular opinion that I hate the summer. But I'm such a fall winter person. And every time Greg and I talk about let's get a homestead and have a farm, I'm like, yeah, but can we do it in Wisconsin, Alaska, Michigan? Let's go north. Let's go up north. I'm like, can we just get it? Even here in the Midwest, I'm just sweltering. So anyway, we're talking about depression. Like I said, this is my story, so I feel like I have a lot to share for you guys, just a lot to talk about. And I want to start with what depression even is, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, you're just sad, just get over it. And that is so far from the truth. Depression is more than feeling sad. It is so much more than feeling sad. It is felt for me, like I can tell you where I feel it in my body, and I know this is probably different for everybody, but like I feel depression here. It's extremely heavy, like right in the core of my being. It's complex. It's a very complex mental health condition, and it impacts your thoughts, it impacts your emotions, it impacts your feelings, it impacts your behaviors. And when something can impact your behaviors, it can impact your beliefs about yourself, because you're thinking, well, I'm useless, I'm lazy, I'm stupid, I'm never going to get anything done, I'm never going to amount to anything. I've been down that hole so many times where depression has kept me down for so long. It made me feel like I was nobody because I was tying my sense of self-worth to my ability to be productive. And on days that I could not be productive, I felt completely worthless. And that ended up trickling over into just like all of the other days of my life, because I've talked about this before, and we'll get around to a little more detail, but I have something called premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It is classified as a mental health condition, even though it is tied to the menstrual cycle. What happens is when you have premenstrual dysphoric disorder, okay, we'll just get into it right now. Tangent. When you have premenstrual dysphoric disorder, your brain processes the fluctuations of your hormones differently. So during luteal phase, after you, in a woman's cycle, after she ovulates, during luteal phase, which is sort of the latter half of the cycle, progesterone and estrogen rise together before plummeting. And this is, if you're coming up on another period, you're not pregnant, you're not going to have a child, they rise and they plummet together. And when that happens around days like 18 to 21 of your cycle, someone with premenstrual dysphoric disorder, the brain is like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I don't like this. It processes that hormone fluctuation differently. And the symptoms of that look like severe depression, anxiety, and then of course bodily symptoms, things like, cramping, fatigue. I get severe migraines. Actually, I also get them at the start of my cycle and around ovulation. So I just have these I'm always having migraines due to the premenstrual dysphoric disorder. But it is classified as a mental health condition because what happens, at least for me, I would spend days, particularly around day 18 to 21, where I would lay down, like I'd come home from work, so completely spent, stuck in a freeze state, and I would lay down and I could just cry. And I would cry so hard, and I couldn't get up. I could not physically bring myself to get up. And it was and then I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to live like this. This is not how I want to live my life. I'm not doing anything. I'm not even enjoying the things that I enjoy. I'm not painting or crafting or spending time with Boo. I'm not playing with my dogs. I'm not out with my friends. I'm laying here rotting away. That's how that felt for me. And my journey is one of medication. We'll get around to that because I want to talk about strategies and tactics when it comes to depression, because there is no one size fits all when it comes to depression. There are so many ways that you can do therapy. There are so many paths that you can take. But I wanted to isolate, just kind of hone in on what depression is. Now, PMDD and depression are not, the same thing. You can have depression and not have premenstrual dysphoric disorder, obviously, because men can be depressed and men don't have a cycle. So obviously you don't have to have both. I just happen to have PMDD, and my depression stems from that. It's a symptom of that, as well as the anxiety and the migraines that I get, things like that. But when something can impact your behavior like that, our lives are made up of the habits that we keep. That's who you become. Your habits are who you become. That's your daily existence. It's the habits that you have. I have a habit of, laying my clothes out in the evening before I get up and go to work in the morning. That way it's okay, I can just get up, put the outfit on. I've got, my whole fit situated. I know what I'm going to wear. That's a habit that determines, kind of how my day starts, how my day goes. But I also have a habit of laying in bed till 5 minutes that I need to get up. And it's that's part of why I put the outfit out, because I'm I know I'm going to sleep until the last minute, because I'm just that sleeper. I've tried, guys, Tangent. I've tried so hard before to be the person that can like get up a little earlier and like do stuff. And sometimes I do. And if I do, I'll sit and I'll journal. I'll take that time to myself. I'll have my coffee. I'll give myself that moment of peace before the day begins, because that's a super important thing that you can do for yourself in terms of self-care. I've talked about that before in the self-care episode, like getting up and taking that time. It used to be something I did a little more regularly. It's definitely gotten like a little harder as, you know, as the days go on. I've been a little more tired. It's like, it's always fluctuating, right? Healing, any kind of healing journey, dealing with depression, anxiety, etc., it is always up and down. It's going to ebb and flow. Right now, that's not really what I'm doing. For a while, that was what I'm doing. I'm sure I'll get back around to that. It's always going to fluctuate. I want you to know that, because if you're on a healing journey and you are not dead ass consistent with everything all the time, it doesn't matter. That doesn't diminish your healing journey. Every single little step that you take counts, and don't let anyone diminish that. Every like 5-minute walk that you take, every healthy meal that you consume, every ounce of water that you drink, the good sleep that you get, like if you are doing things to take care of yourself, no matter how small that is, it counts. It counts big, and I want you to celebrate it, because when you are pulling yourself, particularly if you are pulling yourself out of a dark place, it's really, really hard to go from 0 to 100. There's no such thing. You don't just go, okay, I'm going to get over my depression and tomorrow I'm going to start working out 5 days a week and whatever. Like when I started my journey, I would take little walks, mostly meditative walks at the behest of my therapist. I would get out for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then come back inside, and that was my exercise for the day. Now, today, my exercise looks like, guys, cycle bar is over. So I can't even say that it looks like cycle bar, but it looked like that for a hot minute. Lifting weights, longer walks, like much longer walks with the dogs, with Boo. It's like, it's going to change over time, but you need to start somewhere small. And when you start small, taking those small right actions over and over and over again is going to get you where you want to go. So it's like, those are your habits, right? Those are the habits that you create, and your habits make up your life. But when you have something like depression and it diminishes your ability to keep up with a habit, taking those baby steps, celebrate that. Like if you can get a baby step in, every little thing that you can do, every step that you can take matters so much. So when it comes to, you know, symptoms of depression, obviously that varies from person to person. Like I just kind of explained how that affects me as a symptom of premenstrual dysphoric disorder. But when, you know, you can have any kind of depression where it's a complete condition, like it's a chemical imbalance in the brain, or it's something that's going on in your brain. It's a condition, and it's like the symptoms are not going to be the same for every single person. So it's going to feel like persistent sadness for the most part, but I think there is, you know, sadness is almost not enough of a word for it, right? Blue, it's just down, like that's almost not enough. There's a heaviness with depression that the word sadness just doesn't cover, because it really is something that most people don't want to feel. Now, I do think there are times, and I've experienced this myself, where, you know, maybe you have depression or you have anxiety or something's going on in your life, and it's like, you can feel like comfort in that sadness. Like you can get so used to it that just becomes your mode of existence. But I really want to encourage people to believe that there's a way out of that. That's like so key. Just like believing that there's a way to get out of that. I also want to just like sidestep too and point out that depression is not always a condition. Depression can just be a side step of like grieving. Like you could have just lost a partner or a parent or a sibling or just someone in your life, and you can have depression that stems from a loss. Or I'm feeling really heavy losing cycle bar. It's like a real moment of grief for me. I'm kind of getting around to that acceptance. I'm a little sad, but I'm getting around to that acceptance, and I'm like, okay, what's the next thing gonna be? I'm ready to like look forward and see what the next step is gonna be, because I don't want to linger. You know, I don't want to just linger on something that I have no control over. But when it's a person, I think that's a lot harder, when you have to grieve a person, the loss of a person. And a lot of times, if you're grieving somebody, particularly let's say you lose a partner, somebody you've been with, I'm talking like maybe older people, like you're a little older, you've been with your spouse or something for years, and they pass before you do. And it's like, the body is going to remember that soreness, that trauma, that grief. And even though, years might go by and that might start to feel better, or you might start to, come back around to your life, come back around to your habits, the things that you like to do, leisurely activities, etc., etc. I've seen this happen where maybe the anniversary of that person's death comes around and you still end up having, like, maybe you get sick, or maybe you have a panic attack and you actually have no idea why. Like, you don't necessarily recognize that it's the anniversary of the person's death, and all of a sudden you're in the hospital and you're like, I don't know what's going on, I just have all these symptoms. And it's like, well, it's probably because your body keeps the score. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, and it talks about this, how when trauma, particularly chronic trauma, childhood trauma, things like that, but also like grief trauma, losing somebody, it stays in the body. The body remembers these things for us. Stress and trauma can store itself in the body. It's not just something that's in your head. So, that anniversary might come around and you're all of a sudden getting a cold and you're like, I don't know, it's just a cold. But it's like, actually, it might just be your body's response to, maybe you didn't fully process that grief and you need to. Or maybe there's more than just grief in there. Maybe there is like guilt, or maybe there's anger or something else that's like layered in and you haven't had the chance to process that, and the body is like holding on to it. So depression is not always just a condition. Sometimes it can be something that's, it's stored in the body, and it comes from something else. And then, of course, sometimes it can really just feel like hopelessness. It can feel like I'm never going to get out of this. I had that so often. Like I said, I would lay there and I would just think like, is this my whole life? And I'm thinking, I'm in my late 20s. This is when I'm coming up in my 30s. I'm 33 now. I'm thinking to myself, like, is this what my whole life is going to be? What if I live to be like 90? Like, am I just going to have to live with this sadness, this hopelessness, this like suckery my whole life? And that's when I started to get into that really scary place of not wanting to be alive, because it was like, I don't want to live like this. Like, this is not comfortable. This is not happy. I don't want this. Like, I don't want this. So there's a real seriousness with that. And it's like, I think a lot of people who've never necessarily experienced depression might not understand how heavy that feels. And then to just have to slap a face on and go on about your day and just kind of pretend like everything is fine, but in reality, nothing is fine. And even if somebody asks, you might say, oh yeah, I'm good. The usual, socially acceptable responses, instead of saying like, no, I'm actually depressed out of my fucking mind and blah, blah, blah. Or as Taylor Swift says, I'm so depressed I act like it's my birthday every day. If you guys have not listened to the new TTPD album yet, oh my god. I won't go off on a tangent, but I am a big Swiftie, and I am obsessed with this album. I think it's some of her most sophisticated work, and I love it. Anyway. Okay, another thing I think that comes up with depression is fatigue. That was a big one for me, just constantly feeling tired. And it's not that your body is tired. It's not that you didn't get enough rest. A lot of the time, it's that you are super overstimulated by the life that you're living. Like, there was something I saw the other day. It was like, it's not that I'm tired. It's not that I need rest. It's just, I don't want to be awake. And I think that that's heavy. That's really heavy to think about. I've definitely been in that feeling. I've had days where I felt like that, where it's like, I don't want to get out of bed because I don't want to be awake, because I don't want to live this life. And I think a lot of times with depression, there is this sense of like, it's my life that I don't want to live. Like, I don't want to live like this. It's not that I don't want to live. I just don't want to live like this. Right? Because when stuff feels heavy all the time, it's exhausting. And that fatigue is a big symptom of having something like depression. And I think another thing that can come with that, it kind of comes and goes, it can be appetite. Appetite can be a thing. And I think when people say appetite, they think, oh, you don't want to eat anything, but it can be either way. You can either be so depressed that you don't want to eat, or so depressed that you are tiptoeing into like binge eating disorder, where you're utilizing food as a healing mechanism, which is where I went. I went that direction with it, where I would just reach for food at odd hours of the day, shovel food into my mouth, not even thinking about the fact that I did it. It was a very dissociated experience, where it's like, I know I just ate, but I'm not hungry, and now I'm not full because I'm eating for emotional reasons. And I think a lot of people who want to judge, I think like fatness or binge eating disorder, they don't understand that maybe, or they don't see that it's not a matter of willpower. It's actually a part. So we talked about parts in the internal family systems episode of this podcast show. It's episode 3. And internal family systems is this idea that we have all of these protector parts in us, as well as exiled parts or wounded parts of us, and then we have the self. And the self is who should be leading the internal family system. But a lot of times when there has been trauma, or there's something like depression or anxiety, or there is wounds, like inner child wounds, the protectors show up to protect those exiled inner child parts. And protectors show up as, it's angry outbursts sometimes. Like I talked about in the episode, one of my protectors is an addict. Like I have issues with addiction. I used to abuse alcohol and drugs. I have issues with addiction in terms of like shopping for things, binge watching television, doom scrolling. Like addiction can show up in a lot of ways that aren't like the typical things that you would think. It can even be video games, pornography, sex, like, promiscuity, like that kind of thing. Like addiction can show up in all kinds of different ways. And a lot of times it's being used as a numbing tool to ignore deeply rooted, wounded, exiled feelings, like exiled child parts. So those are like your protector parts. And one of mine, and I'm sure other people understand what I'm talking about, or if you don't, just have a listen. One of mine is a binge eater. I have a name for her. I won't share that. But like, I have a binge eater part that will, when overwhelmed, or particularly when I feel like I'm out of control, I will reach for food to quell those feelings, to feel like I'm regaining a sense of control. It's not a healthy coping mechanism, but it is something that every now and then still, it used to be much worse before I started doing a lot of healing work, but every now and then it still pops up. I definitely notice it still pops up. And the ways that it would pop up for me in particular, it would be like secretly eating. So I had this concept in my mind, I think, that if no one saw me eat it, it didn't happen, or there's shame around eating at all. Like consuming food feels shameful, so I don't want anyone to know that I'm eating. So I'm like opening cabinets really slowly, like closing them really slowly, opening bags so that they don't crinkle, to make like a secret sandwich that no one's gonna know that I'm eating, even though I'm eating it. If no one knew, it didn't happen. That kind of thing. Or even if it was like chocolates or something, right? Like a pack of Reese's cups, like opening that, but doing it silently so that no one knows that I'm eating it. Like these are things, like if any of that's resonating with you, please look into binge eating disorder. There's so much more to it than that, but that was one of the things, like secret eating large amounts of calories outside of normal meal times, eating very quickly, not remembering that you've eating for emotional reasons. Like there's a lot that goes into binge eating disorder. And I think when you are doing healing work around that, definitely talk to a therapist. Guys, I'm always about a therapist. BetterHelp. Still looking to partner with BetterHelp. I'd love to get a little brand partnership going on there, but no partnership, not an ad, just my platform of choice. Really good platform to get back into therapy if you are thinking about trying therapy. I find it to be incredibly affordable compared to going to an office and, having like a therapist, on a couch. But also that's a matter of like, now I got to drive there and I got to drive home and I got to make time for that in my schedule, whether it's to or from work or whatever. But with BetterHelp, a lot of times it was like, I could do it after work. I could do it on my lunch break in my car because it was on my phone. So it was like, it just really makes getting in touch with your therapist super manageable. So I really like that platform for that reason. But, back to the appetite thing, I just want to point out that a lot of times, sometimes depression can be paired with eating disorders. Whether you are not eating or you're binge eating, it can really show up in that way. And then I also think sleeping is another one. Sometimes and again, this can go either way of the spectrum. With depression, sometimes it's insomnia, sometimes it's hypersomnia. Sometimes, like I said, for me, it's like I didn't want to be awake. It was almost like my version of dying without dying, like just sleeping. Like just let me sleep unless I have to absolutely go somewhere and do something, like go to work or like show up for, I don't know, a party or something that was actually kind of fun. Like if I just I just didn't want to be awake. So it was like, okay, I leaned into hypersomnia, but I think I've known people who have dealt with insomnia with depression instead. It's like they can't get to sleep because most of the time, I think that really gets paired along with some anxiety because you tend to be up ruminating, thinking, worrying, like overrunning yourself and stuff like that. Or sometimes it's more of just like a dissociation where maybe you are binge watching television and you are just checking out, and it's like you don't want to go to sleep because you know what's coming after sleep. Okay, so let me elaborate on that a little bit because I've actually felt this where it's not so much insomnia because I'm still pretty, y'all, I don't go to bed beyond like 11 o'clock. Like I am such a grandma with that. Like I go to bed so early, but I think there's a level of like, particularly if you start to get burned out at work, it's like you don't want to go to work, so I will find myself staying up later to put off going to sleep because if I go to sleep, it means I gotta get up and then go to work. Like, it makes no sense logically, but when there's an emotional component to it, it's very easy to fall into these kinds of traps. I'm telling you, like, I don't want to go to sleep because if I go to sleep, I have to get up and go to work. Like, okay, yeah, of course you have to get up and go to work. So, but when there's some depression in there, when you're dealing with mental health problems and issues and you're not seeking help, it's so easy to like get into these things because what they are coping mechanisms and they're parts. It's showing up in whatever way you possibly can to make yourself feel okay. And I think what I like to point out to myself and to others is that you have got to give yourself a little grace here if you're trapped in that, if you're doing that, if you're stuck in that, and just kind of try to release the shame of the things that you do when you're in survival mode. Because being in depression is being in survival mode. When I was doing parts work, when I was doing IFS with my therapist, getting to my depression in sort of a meditative way, like if you can imagine meditating and creating visuals like in your mind, so getting to my depressed part took weeks. It took a lot of conversation with one of my parts that I call Bruiser. She's sort of that angry lash out part, like very, very aggressive. I have another part that is very much like, I call her Demi, short for academic, and it's kind of like that bitch, better let me tell you about it part that's like told you so, like sassy, like just very much, but she's also the part of me that's very like organized and research driven, and like she's the part of me that's capable of like writing and like, curating content for this channel and curating content for my Instagram, like that kind of thing. Like it's the part of me that's like really organized, but it's also the part of me that wants to be like this know-it-all bitch. And that, I think the difference between those two parts of that part are her being burdened versus her being unburdened within my internal family system. So then I have, my addict part, right? We talked about this. This showed up for me for years as, abusing alcohol, abusing drugs, like smoking a lot of weed, just constantly getting crossfaded, constantly just being like completely numbed out by alcohol and drugs and just partying and, that whole thing. Like that was the scene. And it's like, I think it was really easy for me to tell myself that it was just partying. I'm just young. It's just the scene. But the crux of it that I had to sort of come to terms with as I got closer to my 30s was like, I'm drinking because I want to numb my life away because I'm not happy. Like this isn't girls just want to have fun. This is a problem. And that's when I made the decision to lead a sober life. But that part of me was sort of the part that was directly protecting that depressed part of me. And I visualized that depressed part of me as this like kind of 13, 14-year-old version of me, very like gray, run down, the hair wasn't cute and popping off and curly. It was like a shaggy mess. It was, it was constant, it was tears, very hollow looking, like sags under the eyes, just this darkness, this heaviness. And I could feel that. Like I said, I always kind of feel it in my chest, like very much center of my body, and that heart center. Because it's heartache. That's literally what it is. It's heartache for me. It's this grief that I have. And to get to that part, I had to sort of work with that addict part of myself and get her to trust the self that I'm not going to hurt this depressed part. I want to understand and I want to heal that part of myself. And that took it took weeks. It took weeks of work with my therapist. And when I say weeks, I mean months. Like not just like 2 weeks, but like several. So we're talking months technically. It took time. It takes a lot of time to do that kind of healing work. And then once you start doing that healing work and you start to bring yourself light and you start to, kind of come out of that darkness, the thing that I like to always say is that healing is never over. I can't just stop doing this sort of like maintenance stuff that I do to take care of that part of me. I have to continue to eat nutritious food, to move my body, to work out, to drink my water, to get my sleep, to show up and dress up, to pour into find something that gives me purpose like this. I have to continue to pour into this to give myself that good feeling like I'm giving back by sharing my story and the tools and resources that I've used and that I know. And I hope that somebody out there is hearing this and they are feeling hope from it. They're getting inspired and they're thinking like, okay, if she can do it, I can do it. Like that's an important thing to me. And I think that actually helps fuel the healing of some of those parts inside of myself. And I think that that's true for everybody. I think once you kind of get to that place where you start leaning into purpose and, doing some work, whether it's volunteer work or a side hustle or it's your job or whatever, when you start leaning into that and giving back in a really big way, I think that can really aid in your healing as well. So we're going to pause. We've gotten to sort of the end of the explanation of what depression is, right? With a lot of tangents. You guys know I love a tangent. And honestly, I've already kind of touched on strategies and tools that you can use. Because like I said, there's no one size fits all approach when it comes to depression, because depression, as we said, can be stemming from a lot of different things. It could be different for everybody. It's going to look different for everybody. Symptoms can look different. I've seen and had friends in the past, and particularly in high school, where their depression was more manic. It was like they seemed like the life of the party. Like they were constantly doing really fun things. They were the one that was always being daring and confident, and the guys liked them. And it was just like that was their whole outward persona, but it was actually a result of being depressed because they were unhappy, with who they were and accepting themselves. So it was like they were putting on these airs. They were putting on this front, building this character that was larger than life. And it's interesting to think about, because you have to wonder, where's the line there between this character and who you really are? Right? Like where's the line? I don't have an answer for that, but I think that's definitely something worth thinking about. Maybe we can do an episode on that another time. Like that could be a really interesting conversation. So, excuse me. When it comes to strategies, obviously I'm going to throw out therapy. We already said this, like get you some therapy, try one of the online platforms. Like I said, I love BetterHelp. There's also one I think called Talkspace, Talkiatry. I think there's one, God, I can't think of the names of all of them. There's at least like 10 out there at this point. It's become a much more popular way to get therapy. Obviously, you can try to do in-office therapy. Some people really prefer that. Some people really prefer having that person there with them. In my experience, every insurance that I've ever had typically doesn't like to cover therapy, which blows my mind, but also kind of doesn't, because you know how I feel about the insurance companies and the medical business sometimes. It's like, they would, like, the truth of the matter is, I feel like I'm flustering. The truth of the matter is, when your mental health is well, you are way more likely to take care of your physical health, do your exercise. Like I said, the water, like once you get that foundation of mental health, you're more likely to take care of all the other sort of like slices of the full circle wellness pie, as it were. And I think these insurance companies, they know that. They know that if you're well, they're not going to make money, so they want us to be sick. I have all the opinions about it, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. Another episode, actually. There needs to be another episode on that. So, therapy. I like the online platforms because I think sometimes you can run that back through insurance and get some money back, but I've never had to do that. I just went out of pocket. It was affordable enough that I could do that. So that was always nice. But I know a lot of times insurance companies, they'll pay for like 6 visits. And I say this all the time, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. You are not healing trauma in 6 visits with a therapist. Your therapist barely knows your ass by the end of 6 visits. Like, it takes time to build that relationship before you can even start doing deep healing work, if you've got deep healing work to do. Seriously. Okay. I'm gonna leave it there. I'll leave the tangent on the insurance companies and the medical business. Okay. The next sort of big piece and strategy or tool that I wanted to talk about for depression is medication. And this is a hot topic because, and even for me, I used to hold a lot of stigma against meditation. No, I love meditation. Medication. Because I thought to myself, like, I don't want to be medicated. I don't want to be turned into a robot. I don't want to be numbed down. I don't want to be turned off. I was very against medication for myself for the longest time. I thought that I could do cognitive behavioral therapy. I could get through my EMDR. I could get through my IFS. I could do all of my meditations, my journaling, like that. I could sort of out therapy what I now know to be a condition. So I did not get my PMDD diagnosis until I was 32, though it's clear looking back that I've actually had it since the onset of my cycle. I just did not know, and none of my doctors approached me with this, brought it up as a topic, or thought, oh, hey, this might be the reason, right? Like, it just didn't get brought up. I think a lot of times women in this society, we take our information to a doctor about PMDD or PME, and they say, oh, it's just PMS, it's just normal, you're just a woman, and there's this medical gaslighting that happens. They say, you're crazy, you're imagining it, it's not real, or they diminish it completely. And I think it's bullshit, because I think we are way more equipped to understand what's going in our bodies than even, the doctor, right? Like, they're not living it. They can't, because if you're tracking your cycle, I think that's the best way to know if you've got PMDD. If you're tracking your cycle and you notice that during your luteal phase, or maybe even around ovulation onward, that is when you get depressed, it's PMDD or it's PME. Premenstrual exacerbation is like another one. I think there's like some slight differentiations between the two. So you can get a lot of information on that. It's like the Institute Association. It's like IAPMD, I think, .com. If you want a lot of information on that, I'm going to have to double check that, and then I'll link it out in the comments, because I think that's super important for women to have that resource. I actually have a couple of friends who are like, hey, I might actually have PMDD. Like, that sounds a lot like how my cycle progresses and like when my moods come in. And I'll say this too, for me, it personally felt like bipolar disorder until I started tracking my cycle. I thought that I just had bipolar, just because of the depth and steadiness, I'll say, with the sort of ebbs and flows of these like very deep depressed episodes that I would get into, followed by like manic periods of joy and just feeling normal, feeling on top of the world, feeling like, let's go. And it's like, when I started tracking my cycle and I saw when those things were occurring, I was like, oh my God, okay. And I did that while I was still seeing my therapist, and she was like, it could be this, maybe check into it, blah, blah, blah. And I took that, I took those findings to my doctor. There was I can't remember the name of the website, you guys. I'm going to have to look it up and share that too. Oh, no. Hummingway, they make period products. They had a post about premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and I saw that, and when I read all of those symptoms, I was like, oh my God, this is it. Like, I started connecting all these dots between the cycle tracking and, the information from my therapist, and then I took all of that to my doctor, and I was like, dude, here's what's up. And he worked with me to come up with a solution, and the solution for me, and for most of the time, premenstrual dysphoric disorder is treated with a combination of birth control, like a low hormonal birth control, and some kind of antidepressant. For me, it's an SSRI. Now, I know that there is a lot of debate out there about SSRIs, so please, I'm not sitting here telling you, go get on an SSRI. I want you to think about these things, speak with your doctor about them. Particularly, the one that I'm on doesn't have a lot of crazy side effects, which is nice. I take a Lexapro. It has a generic name that I cannot pronounce. It's like escitalopram. These drugs, guys, these drugs. But here's what I think is the most important thing for you to understand. I used to have stigma about taking medication because I thought that meant that I was broken, right? But here's the truth. You cannot out therapy a condition. If you have a chemical imbalance in your brain, if you have manic depression that is chemical, or schizophrenia, or some other, like, post-traumatic stress, something else that's a condition, You cannot out therapy a condition. On the same coin, you also cannot out medicate something that isn't a condition. And I think we see that a lot in our society. We see a lot of doctors or psychiatrists, they want to just slap a medication on it. And then the person ends up feeling like a robot or numb or lost because they don't have a condition. They just need to face their darkness and do really deep healing work. And they would be better off doing something like an EMDR, hypnosis, IFS therapy, some emotional freedom tapping, some somatic experiencing, and doing it consistently. And their doctor is like, no, here's a medication instead. I think it can really go either way. In my experience, because I do have a condition, I finally had to accept that. I got that diagnosis and it helped inform my care. I accepted taking a medication. I take 5 milligrams daily. It's a low dose, along with my low dose hormonal birth control, and I'm Gucci. I still have days during my luteal phase where I feel that heaviness. It's heavier than other days, but it's now to a place where it's manageable. It's not me on the couch crying, feeling like I just don't want to live anymore. Like, it's not a 10 or, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's not 20. It's more like a 3. Like, it's way more manageable. It's to a place where I can use my therapy tools, my meditation, my somatic practicing, doing tapping work, doing journaling, deep breaths, or just doing breath work, doing shadow work, stuff like that. It's to a place where that stuff is enough. And sometimes it is still just a nap. Sometimes it just needs to be a nap, but it's enough. It's no longer to a place where I can't manage the symptoms anymore. And then, like I said, it can be the other way around too. I think there are a lot of people out there who do just want to slap a medication on it. It might not even be their doctor. It might be them. It might be like, oh, I don't want to deal with my anxiety. I just want to take a drug to make it go away. And it's like, you don't understand. If you just keep taking a drug to make it go away, you are effectively creating an addiction or an addict part of you that's reaching for, even if it's prescribed to you by a psychiatrist, you are effectively reaching for something to numb the thing that you are afraid to heal. And if you actually want it to go away, you're going to have to dig in there, just get deep in there, evacuate, exhume the pain, face it, deal with it. We all have some darkness. We all have some darkness in there. You just gotta dig in there, gotta root down and get it out. You can't out-medicate that. Goes both ways. Okay, so as far as strategies go, more strategies, and I think this goes beyond the medication conversation. Now, once you've sort of faced whether you are going to go that route or not, again, always speak to your doctors about this. And I say doctors because you need to create a team. Create a team of medical professionals around you. It wasn't just a conversation between me and my primary care physician. It was a conversation between me and my therapist, my primary care physician, my gynecologist. I'm discussing this with multiple doctors, getting multiple opinions, and coming up with a solution that works for me. You have got to take your health, your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health into your own hands. It is your responsibility. Unless you're a child, then it's your parents' responsibility. But once you're not a child, it's your responsibility to take care of yourself. Get your yearly screenings. Go see your doctor. Create that team around you. My team, it goes beyond therapist. I have a therapist. I've got my primary care physician. Blah, 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 blah. Guys. My primary care physician, gynecologist. I have an orthopedist that is that's my orthopedist. I go to him because I broke a leg. I've had knee surgeries. That's a thing. I have an orthopedist. I have a coach. I have a coach that is helping me with physical fitness and nutrition. It's there's a team. And all of them know about one another. I tell all of my doctors about my other doctors. When I go to my primary care physician, I go in with notes. Last time I just went, I had an appointment recently. I think I talked about this. I came in with my supplements. I had a bag. I came in with all of my supplements. Like, here's the vitamins I'm taking. You know, I'm working with this coach. Like, here's what we're doing. Here are my macros. Like, this is what I'm doing physically for my body right now. You tell me if I'm effing it up in any way. Like, can you weigh in? Give me your opinion. Can you take a look at these supplements? Tell me if anything looks off, blah, 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 blah. Like, I'm being very proactive about those things. Get your yearly dental screenings. Get your yearly optometrist screenings. If you're a woman, get your yearly gynecological screenings. If you're a dude, what is it? You get your prostate checked? Get that shit checked. Do it. Any kind of screenings can save your life. And I think, actually, there might be this, I think there's this new thing out now. I want to say it's called Prenovo. I'd have to look it up, but I keep seeing it on, like, celebrities Instagrams and influencer Instagrams, and it's this like full body MRI that's like a preventative yearly screening. And I'm like, okay, when is this going to be made available to like the average person? Because I guarantee you it's probably really expensive. I have not looked into it, but I'm like, that needs to be going on for everybody. Let's get that like let's get that modernized, so to speak. Like, let's get that on everybody's list, everybody's to-do list, stuff like that. Taking care of yourself in that way, that is how you can really deal with your mental health, mitigate, depression, anxiety, anything that you might have going on. And then I'll also say too, self-care also just extends to like basic hygiene, getting up and getting dressed in the morning, taking a walk, taking silent time when you need silent time, saying no when you need to say no. Like, if you don't want to go to the event or if you want to leave early, do it. Like, if that's what you need, do what you need. You know what I'm saying? And then I think too, stuff like meditation. I always swear by my meditation practice. Like, there's so many different ways that you can meditate. We talked about IFS meditation. When you do an IFS meditation, it is sort of like a visualization of the parts that we talked about. I will go to a place in my mind. Mine in particular, I talked about this in the IFS episode, looks like kind of a hobbit hole because I love fantasy. I also very much love Lord of the Rings, and if I lived in Middle Earth, I would 100% be a hobbit. Yes, that would be my life. So it's like a hobbit hole in like a tree, and I have a very deep visualization where my dog is there, Ella's there. I go inside. All the parts are sitting around this like thick wooden table. We've all got tea, like, and I sit there and I just have this discussion like in my mind, in my mind's eye with my parts. Like, that's a meditation. That's a style of meditation. We're having that thing again, guys. I don't know if anybody's noticing but me. We're having that like moment again where like the side of my nose itching. This drives me crazy. I must solve the problem. It's always happening when I'm sitting here doing this. And I'm like, is it a nervous tick? I don't know. It's driving me nuts. Okay. Other types of meditation. You can do like a body scan where you're thinking about your body, like toes all the way up to the head, and you relax like pieces and pieces and pieces and pieces of your body at a time. There are ways that you can do a meditation with like mala beads. You can take, a set of mala beads. It's like a long strand of beads and go like one bead at a time and like hold the beads, say a mantra, like go to the next bead, say the same mantra. Like, you can pass that around. You can do simple breath work where it's just, it's inhaling, it's exhaling. There's another practice with meditation that I like that's, you can do like an om, like, the om, like you hold that out, or you can do it like a voo. The point of that, I found out, you guys, is actually that your vocals are vibrating, like sending vibrations down your vagus nerve. So your vagus nerve is like the main nerve in your body. It's also your like entire nervous system. And when you stimulate that gently with something like an om or like a voo or a vibration, you can create calmness. Like, you're sending signals to your body that you're safe and that you can calm down. Next week, I'm going to get deep into somatic practices. That's our theme next week. We're going to be talking about more about the voo. We're going to be talking about the tapping. We're going to be talking about that stuff. So I'll just kind of table that for now. But something like a meditative practice, huge bit of self-care right there, like really. And then of course, your typical kind of self-care stuff. Have a spa night, like get yourself relaxed, take care of your skin, your hair, brush your teeth, floss, like just have like a whole thing, whatever. If you feel like that needs a glass of wine, consider why you're drinking it. I'm always gonna ask and prompt that, I think, now, just because I have seen personally over a year now what it feels like to live a sober life and what it feels like to get away from alcohol. And I'm not telling you what to do. I don't want to like start a fight. I'm gonna start a fight. But if you feel like your relaxation night needs a beverage, an alcoholic beverage, please ask yourself why. Because I think addiction is another one of those things that's really on the rise as a result of the rise in depression, anxiety, and stuff like that. We are sicker than ever, like as a society. And that's also part of why I really want to lean into doing some of this work, because I've started to, in the last like 2-3 years, take a lot better care of myself. And I've seen firsthand how that has changed my life, improved my mental health. And I really want to share that with other people. So I'm not just sitting here trying to tell you what to do. I'm speaking always from experience. I'm just telling you what works for me. Take it or leave it. Take what you like, throw away what you don't like, whatever. I just want to be able to share what I've experienced, what I've tried, what I like, what I don't like, and share that with you guys so that maybe it sparks an idea in you. And maybe you're like, hey, I want to try this somatic experiencing thing. I want to try this meditation thing. Hey, maybe she's right. I could try to get some therapy. Like, it could really benefit me. Whatever. I think if I can touch someone's life like that, that would mean the world to me. So, with all of that said, I hope that this episode gave you a little nugget tonight. I hope that it gave you something to think about, something to chew on, something to maybe try or look up. And if you dug it, I would love for you to leave a comment, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with a friend, share it with your mom, your sister, whatever. Hit social media with it. Give me a follow. I would really appreciate it. It's just going to go a long way. Other than that, I will see you guys next time. And in the meantime, just, be well. See ya.